We owe a huge, huge debt to people like yourself, Shaista, and other people in your generation that set up these massive organizations, all of these smaller organizations, all the women in the sector that are doing that frontline work and awareness raising and advocacy and, representation for Muslim women's voices that just were not heard. And you guys have done such an incredible job of giving a platform, giving a voice, doing amazing research, and just giving a lifeline to women who would otherwise not be met and not have their needs served in mainstream services, right? Support services. So it's a huge, huge, huge endeavor. But then this is where we come in. Like this is a conversation that I was literally having with my mom yesterday about that next generation of Muslim women activists and feminists.
But I do think that, in each sort of, probably every few decades, I think everyone's responding to maybe a slightly different need, and they probably have to use techniques. It kind of, when you were talking about, the appreciation for what other women are doing, it kind of reminded me of, like, I've got a favorite kind of Arab proverb, probably going to get this completely wrong. So they planted before us, and now we eat what they planted. We now too must plant, so those who come after us can too eat. It's a bit like we're standing on the shoulders of Western feminists, but also Muslim feminists who did fantastic work challenging, patriarchal interpretations of Islam, for example. Then there's Western feminists, in the UK, for example, and we're building on those. And actually, for example, the South Asian feminists that set up organisations in the 70s and 80s, and we're kind of built on that. And I think the next generation, they're now to be looking at, actually it's the online world that's spreading a lot of hatred, negativity, that toxic Muslim male masculinity on top of all of that, which is being promoted on social media. Some of the stuff that some of these men are saying, and then they're using Islam to justify their bad behavior, misogynistic views, which is also very awful, and they're influencing young men.
The manosphere, as
Yes,
they
the
call it.
manosphere. So we've got a lot of challenges. There's a lot to do. We're
There is.
tired. We're too tired. I'm tired. So they now need to use new techniques. We're probably still doing old school, which is the helpline, for example, research, and all of that is still important and valuable, and we need to do that. But I think the younger generation who are more into AI and technology and understand new technologies, they would probably be taking maybe different techniques and approaches and building on what we're going to, what we've been doing. And I think if we can try and use the big battle is at the moment, we can do all this fantastic work, but we're battling against algorithms and bots. Before there'd be negative, if we just take, for example, Islamophobia, there'd be negative stories here now and again, and you could try and challenge that disinformation. But now it's just constant. Algorithms are promoting it. There's billionaires who are actually funding the Islamophobia industry. People are making money. Then even the manosphere, if you look at them, they're probably thinking, if we say the most outrageous things, we're going to get more clicks. And then we're going to make, more money from this. The more clicks that we get, we're going to get more followers. So that is what we're grappling with. And we will also have to then respond with new ways, which is, using AI, for example, to try and how can we develop our messages, more quickly and that will resonate with a large number of audiences. And I think what I've seen that's probably a bit different now, everyone has been for long. I mean, we do partnership work, but working in silos. And that's not because, people don't like each other. We're just so busy running your own organization. It's hard enough. And partnership work is also can be quite stressful and resource draining. But I've seen in the last probably 18 months or so, more and more organizations that talking to each other, having meetings with each other, just offloading, learning from one another. even if they're kind of collaborating in the background, you might not see it in the forefront. For example, like, like an event together, working in partnership, because we need to. I think we need to now start coming together, whether it's just generally the Muslim sector, women, charities, mosques, all the types of charity coming together, or whether it's the women's charities across sectors. Because one of my but maybe going slightly off topic, but I think one of my frustrations is the women's sector generally haven't spoken enough about the anti-Muslim hostility that Muslim women face. And that's the women's sector who normally stand up for women's rights, justice, are very quick to speak about the poor Muslim women in Afghanistan and Iran. And actually, if you're worried about Muslim women, you should equally be vocal when they're getting attacked on the street or experiencing discrimination in the workplace. And I just feel that the women's sector largely has been silent. I think they could have been, even when something happens, sending an email to saying, "How are you? Are you okay?" Um, it must be a difficult time. Like our charity over the years that we've been around over 20 years, we rarely used to get hate emails. It used to be like one now and again every few years you get a silly little email or a little recorded message and you just forget about it. But in the last sort of since the riots really, a couple of years ago,
The
we've had
Southport riots.
yes, that's right, and we've had several we've had letters posted to us in relation to, all Muslims are rapists and it's around grooming gangs and we don't want Sharia law, that type of thing. And, sort of threatening rape. And there's one particular one which said that the IDF is going to find you and kill you, that type of thing. So that never used to happen. And we've had, a number of those. So something has really changed. And of course, we did report it to the police and they couldn't find who it was. So so that's the thing. I think they need to strengthen laws, particularly online. A lot of people can say and do what they want online and get stir up hatred and get away with it. And then that then influences other people who will do the letter writing and who will then even go on to commit violence as well.
And this is the thing, right? So it's the smaller actions that are indicative of the likelihood of something bigger to happen. So isn't that what we also understand about domestic violence or any kind of violence towards women and minorities, that it's the little microaggressions that sometimes you overlook and you think, oh, that's just something little. Oh, it's not going to amount to much. There's no point reporting it. But over time, it can build up, like it's a pattern, and then things get more and more sinister or more and more aggressive, and then they can end in really violent situations. And
That's right. That's
yeah,
right. Because if you look at domestic abuse, it's never suddenly someone is, really violent straight away. It does start off with the smaller, different types of abuse. It could be emotional abuse. It could be, a slap and a push, and then it progresses. And that's the same in society. If you then allow, and it's like, for example, when you have low level, like, for example, in the men doing sort of a lower level sexual harassment or exposing themselves in public, and then if that doesn't get stopped, that can escalate into, really serious and violent crime. And it's the same with online spaces. And I have to say, over the last 2 years, I'm very, very disappointed in the government that they have, although they've done some good work. For example, when we did have the riots, they did arrest the rioters quite quickly and hold them to account. But over the last 2 years, there's been a lot, not just a little bit, a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric. Muslims have been dehumanized, Muslims have been attacked, mosques have been burnt, women, the 2 Sikh women were raped, the perpetrators thought that, they were Muslim. A lot has happened, and there's stuff that happens that doesn't even get really media headlines. For example, there's been a lot of arrests where men were plotting and planning to white men plotting and planning to blow up Muslims, which, you know, it does get a little bit of news coverage. Now, given all of that and what's been happening, I feel that the government and the ministers haven't been really vocal, not in the chamber, because they could set a tone. I think they're almost worried and scared that if they kind of defend, that's the impression I get, is if they overly defend Muslims, that somehow, you know, they're going to lose the some of the voters, and, for example, might go to the Reform Party as an example, or they might lose the votes. But they're not actually worried about the people that are voting for you, which there's a lot of decent human beings who are against what we're seeing, and they haven't been vocal. And what I found with the current government is you have to really push them and write to them and raise questions before then they say something, and it should require that. A strong leadership, you know, requires you to stand up when there is this negative rhetoric, whether it's in the chamber, outside the chamber, and really be bold and challenge it. And I think that probably has also made the situation worse, not tackling online, for example, that online, what's been happening online, that needs to be challenged. In fact, it's threatening. Forget about Muslims. Let's put Muslims aside for a minute. It's actually threatening UK democracy. You've got people from abroad threatening our democracy, basically, with disinformation that's being promoted that people are believing. And why aren't the government then holding them to account with stronger legislation? We do have some. There is the Online Safety Act, but then why are Ofcom not then the government not holding Ofcom to account? I mean, I can go on and on, really. So I think we need a lot more accountability. It's the Wild West right now, online.
It really
Um,
is. It really is. And as somebody who speaks out about Muslim women's rights, and I can tell you, it is the Wild West. And so we kind of get it, and you'll be very familiar with this. We get it from both angles, right? So we
yes.
get the Islamophobes on one side, which are just like, oh God, the kind of things that they say on the comment section. But then you also get the Muslim men misogynists, with their absolute hatred actually for us. It's no less hateful. It's the same. It's towards our gender. It's towards our visibility as Muslim women who don't conform to their idea of what a proper Muslim woman should be.
How do
And
you keep resilient to that? How do you keep going and not just think, oh, I can't do this anymore? Because it can be mentally exhausting. So what keeps you going then?
do you know what? I love it. I love it. I make fun of them, and I actually use it to point out the exact argument that we're making. It's like, thank you for proving my point.
Gives you
Thank
more
you.
content.
Yeah, it's like, thank you for proving that we need feminism. Thank you for proving that there are men out there who absolutely hate women. So the more they argue against feminism and that we don't need feminism, they are literally proving the opposite of their argument, because they're trying to shut us down. And that just allows other people to see the problem. Because I think what happens is sometimes even women, Muslim women, don't really understand how much of a problem there is. They're like, oh, we're fine. We're in the West. We've got our rights. You know, we can practice our faith. We can do what we want compared to, say, other Muslims in you know, like Muslim dominated countries. Yeah. Muslim majority countries, sorry. And they can sometimes bury their heads in the sand a little bit as to how much of a problem there is in our community with very negative attitudes towards women and girls, and how that translates then into harmful practices that actually limit the opportunities for women and cause violence as well. And when they see the comments and they see the level of vitriol and just the hate that spews out of these men and the kind of vile things that they say, it's like, oh, actually, yeah, maybe there is a problem. maybe you guys do need to do what you're doing. So I think it works for us.
I think more Muslim men though we need allies, right? So I think more Muslim men need to. There is a few, I think I follow one or two that do actually, show the videos and say this is what the Muslim man has said, and this is completely against it. It's against Islam, etc. But we need more of that. We need more. We need more not just religious leaders, it just can be anybody, but we need more Muslim men calling it out, whether it's online, and I'm sure people hear it in person as well when they are hanging around with other men. I think to call it out, because I think that is going to be so key, because this is the next generation. So that's someone's sons and brothers, etc. And they're going to go on to have children. So it is deeply worrying. And actually, those are the people that are giving us all a bad name, because the Times and the Telegraph will pick up what they're saying, what these men are saying, make it headline news, and then they'll say, oh, look, this is how all Muslims think and behave. And so it impacts us all. So actually, we do need to call it out, because it's that is what others are using as ammunition against us.
100%. But see, that's where I don't have much faith. So I don't really have much faith in our religious
Leadership.
leaders.
Yeah.
The male religious leaders, community leaders. I don't believe that they are going to, because they've had their chance. Women's organizations like yourselves and activists have been asking them to get involved in these conversations. For example, to have more empowering khutbahs on Jummah, right, to the youth, and actually speak to kind of some of these problems. But they're not using that opportunity. Rather, they keep pushing back and doubling down even harder that no, we don't believe in this kind of women's freedom and women's liberation, and that's not Islam. So they will stick to their hardline, rigid interpretation of Islam and kind of use it as a way to kind of solidify Muslim identity. Like, this is what it means to be a Muslim. Don't be like those Western feminists. That's what I keep hearing. So I don't have much faith, which is why I concentrate my efforts with other women, women's organizations and women activists, and just work with the women solely, because
Yeah.
I find it very draining. We're saying, do you find social media draining? I don't find social media draining. I find working with men in in community spaces, I find that draining. What's been your experience of that?
Well, I mostly work with Muslim women, but having said that, recently, in the last probably 12 months, I won't name them, I have been speaking to more Muslim male-led organizations as well, because I do think we need to create those bonds, those allyships, start working together. And even if it is just having a little moan to each other about the experiences of anti-Muslim hostility or the challenges that we're experiencing within Muslim communities. So that's, I guess, a different approach that we've taken in the last, as I've said, last 12 months or so.
How's it going? What's the response been?
It's been good. I think everyone sort of feels that, because Muslims are under attack, I think it does get you to then start to we need solidarity. I mean, really, we need solidarity from mainstream organizations, leaders and politicians. But the starting point is actually, let's just start looking internally and having those conversations. And look, another interesting, this is, again, slightly off topic, but I mean, I've been invited to, like, obviously, when we think of Saudi Arabia, we think of a religiously conservative country, but even then, they have shifted in terms of, women's rights. Still more to do. But for example,
Don't get me
I've been
started on Saudi Arabia.
no. So I've been invited to speak at a conference, and it is, to invite somebody, I guess, who is Western Muslim, female feminist, would be groundbreaking. So I'll be talking about domestic abuse and what the role of, for example, religious leadership and the role that they can play to tackle that. And that will be in Saudi Arabia. So, if things can start shifting over there, we can start shifting things over here too. But it's going to take time. I guess that's what I mean. I wouldn't have thought, look, if someone asked me 5 years ago, would I be invited to speak on this issue abroad in that country, I would have said absolutely not. But I am. So I do have a little bit of hope. And I think what I need to do is I need to hold on to my core personality, which I've always been glass is always half full, no matter what hardship I've faced in terms of running my organization or getting abused or the challenges in life generally or in my work life. It's for the first time in the last 18 months, 1 to 2 years, I've started to be a little bit like glass half empty, and that is not like me. And that is because of the myriad of challenges that we're facing and with very little and no resource and feeling burnt out. And I don't want to go down that route of being that person of glass half empty, because then, I don't think that's a good thing. It is hope for the future, that future is going to be better for us and our children and future generations is what keeps people going. And that's got to keep us going.
I love that. And if we didn't have hope, we wouldn't be doing this, right? If we didn't think there was actually a chance for change, why would we waste our energy and our time?
Exactly. So we'd stop, wouldn't we? We would stop our activism. So that therefore we've got to try and hold on to that.
Absolutely. I don't know what you think, but I feel like the sector's just changed so much, and I feel like the way things are going, like funding itself is like much more difficult to get, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's start off with that actually. So look, years ago, when just quickly in terms of Muslim Women's Network, it was a PO box once upon a time at my house with myself, and I would go
Amazing.
around saying that I'm an executive director, and everyone thought I had lots of staff and a big office, and it was just myself, a PO box with a laptop, not even a website or an office. And eventually, I did start applying for funding, and I used to just Google how to do things, how to sort of set up an organization. And I had a lot of rejections, but I learned from that. And eventually I thought, oh, this is not bad. I'm quite good at fundraising. And years ago, I would do 10 application forms in a year, and I'd get 4 successes, 40%. I was happy with that. And as the years went by, particularly I would say in the last 4 years, it's got very difficult. Suddenly my application rate went up to 16, 20, 22. In 2025, I put in 30 applications and my success rate is 15%.
Wow.
So
And
the
that's
number of applications, go on.
Muslim Women's Network, which is the biggest Muslim charity in the UK.
So I think the problem is, we're quite niche. So we're the only national charity for Muslim women. So given the breadth of what we do in terms of research consultations, and we've got helplines, I thought and the problems that we face in society generally and within Muslim communities, I thought funding would be easier to get, but it's actually become more difficult. And it's not just Muslim Women's Network. I'm hearing this across the women's sector, and I'm really worried that already we're seeing some charities scaling back, and I'm worried over the next few years that we might end up in a situation where, some charities might end up shutting down, and then you've got to then restart that work all over again, leaving massive gaps. And the other problem is huge burnout. There's a lot of CEOs are getting burnt out, and then some have left their jobs.
Yeah. I see that happening a lot across the sector, the women's sector. And it just reflects what the research shows as well, doesn't it? That women do so much of the unpaid, undervalued, unappreciated, invisible labor in society, which causes us to burn out, get unwell, and then not be able to give back. And it's not to say that that's just what we're here for, is to work and serve and take care of communities. But I think naturally that is the kind of work that women are drawn to. We do want to serve and help our communities and solve the problems.
And the issue is, it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's not a Monday to Friday. It's 7 days a week. It could be any time of the day. And the issue is the problems are getting worse. I mean, some of the problems that we get on the helpline, the cases are getting more and more complicated. Mental health, poor mental health is skyrocketing. I mean, we've had to shut down our waiting list. In fact, the waiting list is probably about 9 months now. It used to be 3 months years ago. So you've got the mental health issues. Personal problems are quite complex. Then there's the whole issue of what's happening in society generally with the anti-Muslim hostility, hatred, abuse, discrimination, whatever terminology you want to use, Islamophobia. It's never been as bad as it is now. And there's those issues that we have to deal with as well. How people are being treated in the workplace, in public spaces. And it's no longer, this discrimination is no longer on the fringes, it's mainstream. And when people are hearing this rhetoric online by politicians, that does feed into service provision and in the workplace. And no doubt it probably feeds into funding as well. So so actually our services are needed more now than they were before, and less funding is available.
Wow, that paints a picture, doesn't it? And I just want to go back to the work that you're doing with Muslim men's organizations. So you said that, you're finding solidarity over this issue of anti-Muslim hatred, right? And while I think that's amazing, I think that's great, I do
I
want to
know where
ask
you're going.
I do want to ask you if you find that same level of solidarity when it comes to gender-based violence and the issues that Muslim women are facing within the community. So not just in terms of having this common enemy outside there, outside of the community, but actually within the community itself, coming from Muslim men. Is there that same recognition? Is there that same level of interest in hearing Muslim women's voices about what they are experiencing?
So I have raised the issue of violence against women and girls, and gave examples of some of the really complicated cases that we're getting. So I have raised it, and people have been receptive, an acknowledgement that this is an issue. I mean, I've not heard of concrete plans of how those issues are going to be challenged by other organisations, but this is the start of a conversation. So it's like early days. I mean, look, as an example, our charity, since we've started, all of our funding has come from mainstream non-Muslim organizations and foundations. And I remember many years ago, so one of my bugbears was that, why aren't Muslim organizations funding some of the issues and problems that we deal with, domestic abuse being one of them, by Muslim philanthropists and charities. And I was ignored. But that said, things I do think are starting to change a bit late, but so I'm happy to say that Islamic Relief, for example, for the first time, actually gave us some funding, and that was for a domestic abuse caseworker, and that was last year. And we're getting some funding again this year. So that's a change. I'm not really sure, for example, what the other charities are doing. I'm actually speaking at an event, an Islamic Relief event this week in a few days, next week in a few days' time, to actually highlight our helpline and some of the work that we do, to highlight that to a broader audience. But I do still think if you look at a lot of the philanthropists, in the Muslim philanthropists, that is not what they are funding. They are funding probably other types of maybe softer issues, not probably where we would want to see the money go. So I still think there's a
Yeah.
long way to go.
There's a lot of masjid building that is still happening. And I must
Very
say,
easy to
I
get a money
find
for a
it
masjid.
so frustrating. Like, it just irks me now when I keep getting messages on WhatsApp for raising money for this masjid and that masjid and building. And I'm getting to the point now where I'm just like, oh my God, when are people going to wake up that we've got bigger fish to fry right now? Like, as you said earlier, like, we are in a really difficult situation. not just as a Muslim community in a hostile environment, but just as humanity in general, right? Facing these big threats from, you know, billionaire tech giants and AI and algorithms and social media, and the problem of brainwashing and indoctrination and this move towards, I'm just going to say it, fascism, because as a history of sorry, as a student of history and politics and international relations, you know, it's about pattern recognition, and we can see this is where we're heading, right? So all the things that you've been talking about that you've noticed in terms of the challenges that Muslim women are facing, right? It is pointing in one direction. The hostility is increasing, and it's not just towards us as a minority group; it is towards all marginalized people in Western Europe and America, Trump's America, you know, and what they're exporting.
So maybe what we need to do then, get better at doing is telling our stories, for example.
Mm.
That can be two types of stories. One is positive storytelling, which is using a film, video, short form, to tell, you know, our positive contributions to society. But we also need to use storytelling to highlight what the challenges are. And sometimes seeing that quick 30-second video about domestic abuse or the challenges, maybe that's more likely to get a donation or get noticed by a philanthropist rather than uh, you know, writing a research report. All that's important still, or or writing letters, particularly in the current climate. Maybe those techniques were fine, you know, 10 years ago. Everyone has a very short attention span. Everyone's very time poor. You know, we're being bombarded probably with information. So maybe that's something that we need to be better at. And now we've got all these AI technologies, and you can use avatars, etc. You don't even need to be in videos. But obviously we need to learn these new technologies.
That's an amazing idea. And I'm just going to say something that I think the universe is trying to tell me something here, because you're the second person in 24 hours to say that we need to use storytelling, and that the old ways of doing things in terms of, you know, the research and presenting facts and figures and, you know, charts showing the different levels of harm, you know, people don't care. They want a story. They want an emotional connection, right? That is how human beings essentially learn, and how we have something activated within us is through storytelling. And I was just talking to another activist about this yesterday, and we were saying how, you know, storytelling and narrative was the earliest form of knowledge transfer. Evolutionarily speaking, human beings would sit around the fire and talk and tell stories. And this is how parents would teach their children. It was always through story, and one generation to the next, we passed knowledge through story. And
And
this is,
Hadith was passing
yes,
stories, wasn't it? So
exactly,
we're good at
exactly,
storytelling.
exactly. And it's like baked into our biology that we respond to stories. It activates something in our brains that goes, oh, okay, I'm going to listen to this. And it automatically makes you reflect as well. So much more than sort of, you know, data, facts, figures, all of this, right? Interesting, but not engaging in the same way. So yeah, I think there's huge, huge power in women telling their stories. I wanted to ask you about the helpline, right? So you have a national helpline
Got
that,
two now. Got
oh,
two.
you've got two now. Okay. So what's the difference between the two?
So one is the Muslim Women's Network Helpline, which has been around 11 years now, and that is violence against women and girls. So majority of the calls are domestic abuse, honor-based abuse, forced marriage, and then related issues to that, such as, you know, housing, homelessness, safeguarding, mental health. And then the second one we launched last October, which is Muslim Safety Net, which is encouraging Muslims, not just Muslim women, to report hate crime discrimination in the workplace when accessing services, but also the website is full of lots and lots of legal information, because I do think there's a low level of legal literacy amongst Muslims, and so we want to empower them with legal knowledge.
Amazing. So, in terms of the first original helpline, what kinds of issues, what are the main issues that you see coming up again and again?
Oh God, I don't know where to start. There's so many. We help about 1,500 service users every year. 90% are Muslim women, 5% are women who are of no other faith, and 5% are men, actually. Domestic abuse, but it's actually not just physical violence, coercive control. A lot of women don't understand what coercive control is. So, for example, people think of the obvious thing, well, the woman can't go out or her movements are monitored, but it's actually really like, for example, we've had cases where men have put cameras in the house to monitor the movements in the house or who's coming in and out. We've also had women where they've gone out shopping, and the husband, for example, might check receipts to see what time, not just what was spent, but what time she was in that shop, and then what time she was in the next shop, and then, doing some calculations of how long it took from getting from one shop to another. That level of behavior, and not really understanding, for example, forced to have sex. Uh, there's in terms of financial abuse, and some of the cases are, really, really complicated. We've had, I won't go into it too much, a very similar, the Pellico case in France. We've had something similar to that.
Really?
We've had, we've had, there's examples where a lot of people are highlighting rape in families, but and some are reporting in childhood sexual abuse. What we're also seeing is peer on peer abuse as well. Like, well, this is sorry to, it's awful to tell you, but for example, brothers, raping sisters, or there's been fathers or grandfathers raping their daughters. So we're getting some really upsetting cases, but at least they can offload to us, because they would find it difficult to share those stories of their experiences to other family members, and they probably don't want to go to mainstream services as well. So we give them mental support, counselling. Although our counselling waiting list is really long, and we do support them if they want to report abuse to the police. We've had the other one, I'm actually going to speak on it on Parliament next week, so transnational marriage abandonment. So this is where the husband knows that the visa's coming up to renewal, where you can get an indefinite leave to remain, and they will just take the wife on a pretend holiday abroad and leave young children under the age of 5 and the wife abroad and come back. So then what we will do is we will work with, say, a law firm. They'll do the legal paperwork to get them back, and we've paid for flights for children and the woman to come back. So I'm actually going to be speaking on that and what I would like the government to do, because this issue is getting worse and worse. And when I've said to government, why are we not holding the perpetrators to account? I've been told, well, it's coercive control. But how many convictions and coercive control is against the law? But because people don't understand it, how many convictions have we had for coercive control?
Not many.
Hardly any. Then to say, well, actually, a woman can try and prosecute under that. It's very simple. All you have to do is say, I've been stranded abroad. Evidence of that is very easy to prove, and therefore, and have an offence called exit trafficking. That's exactly what they do in Australia. A man got jailed for 4 years because he left his wife abroad. I think it was in a country in Africa, and then went back to Australia. He was sentenced to 4 years. Why can't we do the same? So I've been asking the government about this for the last 2 years. I'm going to get up again. And we've, because we get these cases, and I just want to share something really personal. This happened to me, actually, when I was a child. My dad in the 70s took my mum and myself and my brother and left us abroad in the 70s. Then my mum had to struggle to come back on her own, then I was left stranded there. It's about 5 for a year because I didn't chat to go and make my passport again. And it took her 4 years to get my younger brother over.
Oh my
And that, that does traumatize you. And, you feel the impacts of that for the rest of your life. So the fact that I experienced it in the 70s, it's still going on now, but it's happening at a much higher rate now. And the government won't do anything. So what I will say here is, and I have raised this government, I think when they look at violence against women and girls of Asian and Black women, minoritized women, they look at it through quite probably a racial lens, a white lens. I would even say in a kind of a racist way, not deliberately but indirectly, so the unconscious bias, because each successive government have spent a lot of money trying to challenge and do something about honour-based abuse, forced marriage, female genital mutilation. It's like, oh, these cultural abuses, well, we need to do something about this other culture. But if you look at what is actually causing the most harm and these are all awful and harmful things, but domestic abuse, in intimate, whether it's in the family or whether it's your partner doing it, that is what is killing women. So if you look at the domestic homicide rates, 24% of them are of minority ethnic women who only make up, and they make up 18% of the population. So they're overrepresented by
wow.
1/3. So why not put the money into stopping the killing of women, which could mean, more specialist helplines, for example. It could be more bespoke campaigns for the different types of communities. But rather than putting money there, they tend to put more money into these other cultural abuses rather than domestic abuse, which is the same type of domestic abuse that happens in all types of communities. It's killing women. I've been raising this with government for the last 2 years. And even now, there's probably some funding coming out, and the levels of funding given for specialist organizations is really low given what we're facing. So they're looking at our problems through a white lens, basically. And I've used those words in Parliament, by the way.
So that is the crux of it, really, because when you are talking about something like, FGM or forced marriage or honor-based violence, it's easy to then say that's a them problem, right? Like us and them. Whereas if you talk about domestic violence or say coercive control, generally you have to look at the problem holistically. You have to look at the problem within your people as well, right? It's not just an Asian problem or a Muslim problem or an ethnic minority problem. It's an all men problem, right? Domestic violence is committed by white men as well. And that would make them have to look at that issue and their people, right? And that's, I think, the barrier. That's what they don't want to do. It's very easy to say that gender-based violence is a Muslim issue, and that's the kind of stick that they continuously beat us with. The way we treat our women is so bad, but actually they don't want to look at how women in their society are being also murdered, killed, beaten, raped every single day.
Yeah, I mean, they are looking at those issues, and they do provide funding from that. And I guess the point I'm making is that when it comes to domestic abuse, the same type of abuse in Black and Asian and minority ethnic communities, that type of abuse, that doesn't really get that much attention. The only attention they give is to these other cultural types of abuse, because domestic abuse isn't a cultural issue, it's domestic
No,
abuse,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
They tend to put more money into these other issues. It's almost like maybe they think it's makes them look good, publicity. I don't quite know.
It kind of makes us look bad. That's what I
And it's
think.
bad. Yeah, and probably why. And I just do not understand it. And I've written so many letters to government. In fact, I wrote another one last week. It was about 5 pages, highlighting this issue that I just don't understand. I just don't get it. That, what I would like to see is more funding being made available for domestic abuse but also, counselling, but also bespoke campaigns. So getting, men involved in that on domestic abuse. But previously, when I've seen campaigns funded by the government for the community, it's only been on the three issues: FGM, forced marriage, honour-based abuse. They don't fund these bespoke campaigns for the different communities for domestic abuse or coercive control or financial control.
Mm. Yeah, there's a real problem there, isn't there? I wanted to ask you actually about your role in the Houses of Parliament, right? So you're writing these letters and you're getting up in Parliament and you're speaking on these issues. And I've seen some of your videos. And it's amazing that you are there doing this. You're representing. So what has that experience been like for you, ending up in the Houses of Parliament as a baroness?
Well, yes, I've been there 4 years now. So I got appointed in 2022 in June. And when I first went in there, I mean, I'd be walking around like looking up at the ceilings because they're beautiful ceilings, and I just sort of had a bit of an imposter syndrome, thinking, "Oh my God, you're amongst all these people who are, former MPs or judges or ex-police officers or diplomats or billionaires," and you're thinking, "I'm here from the charity sector." But then as I started to listen to debates and listen to, everyone's got their own expertise. And I will, I'm not going to speak on a random issue. I'll be speaking predominantly, I'll be speaking on, women's issues, whatever they may be, more broadly. And depending on the issue, then I'll talk about Black and minoritized and Asian women. And then I'll also specifically speak about Muslim women. Lately, I have been mentioning Muslim women quite a lot. So I'll stick to that. But what I realise is, no, actually, I'm there and I'm representing an opinion and a voice and experiences that people aren't going to really talk about. So when, for example, other politicians do talk about, for example, Muslim women, it is rarely about the issues that are, what we're facing, which is, hate crime and domestic abuse. They do tend to, the other politicians will talk about Muslim women in Afghanistan or Iran, or they'll talk about honor-based abuse and forced marriage and FGM. You'll rarely hear them talk about, the issues that I talk about, which is, hatred, discrimination, and domestic abuse. So, I now feel confident, obviously, when you're first there. And it's learning. Everyone is, what I do like about the House of Lords is everyone's nice and friendly. Doesn't matter what people are from different parties. But it is like going to school. You don't know everybody, because a lot of people ask me, "Oh, do you know," or name people, "Do you know them?" And, I'll walk past, former prime ministers, Theresa May or
Wow.
David Cameron. Sometimes at one time sitting in the library and David Cameron was sitting next to me reading the paper. But it's difficult to have conversation if you don't know them. I mean, what do you talk to them about? So it is like being in big school. You don't know. And what I found actually is I made an assumption, because I'm a crossbench. Um, and so we don't have, so the different parties, they look after their, they have meetings and things like that. And
So
I
you
just
don't
assumed,
belong to a specific party
no,
then?
I don't belong to a specific party, but I just assumed, all Labour peers will know each other, all Conservative peers will know each other. And what I've realised is actually don't all know each other, even within their own parties, because people are coming in at different times of the day, and they'll be speaking depending on what issue that you speak on. But how I'm using my position actually is quite important, is not only just asking questions when I get up, or I'll write questions, is trying to have meetings, with ministers or with civil servants, outside of, the chamber, and writing letters. I'm a prolific, you're probably sick and tired of me actually now. I write a lot of letters. I have been for the last few years, because I feel that when you're in the chamber and you ask a question, they can give you a very bland, broad answer, basically not answering the question, move on. Whereas if you get a 5-page letter that's very detailed and I need answers to them, they've got to then put it in writing and a reply. It's a lot more detailed. So it's got to be then probably a bit more careful in what they say. And that has then resulted in me picking up something in that letter and thinking, oh, actually, didn't know this. Let me ask a little bit more about that. And then trying to push for example, policy changes. So that's how I'm using my time. And the other way is, I do try and, yes, you might meet all these important people, but I don't want to forget, I came from the charity sector, so I still will engage with, even though I'm quite time poor, with, women's organisations. So women have, brought Muslim women in, for example, to give them tours of parliament, have little round tables with Muslim women of, all different types of backgrounds, because I want them to also, I want them to be a part of parliament and come round and try and, extend my hand and the kind of, because I remember when I used to try and contact politicians, and it was, there'd be a few that would be really willing and helpful to book a room, for example, and give me time. And I remember that, and it was so important to me. Now I want to give some of my time back, so I try and do that as well.
Oh, that's amazing. And I can say from my experience, Shaista, you've always had time for me. Right from the beginning, when I first started We Rise and I started, doing my Muslim women's empowerment work, and I would consider you as one of my earliest mentors, someone who's
Thank
always
you.
supported me, and I really appreciate that. And I definitely felt that hand, that helping hand. Like, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, you know, this is what I've learned. This is, you've always given me advice. And I really appreciate that. And actually, I'm going to ask you a question about that now. What advice do you have for me now in this moment with what I'm currently doing with We Rise? Yeah. Have you got any
I
pearls of
want
wisdom?
I want more Muslim women to do advocacy. So we're good at helping people, on the helplines, or if people have got problems, or raising the issue and awareness raising. But I really need more Muslim women to do advocacy. By that, what I mean is holding power holders to account. So that can mean whether it's the media, whether it's your writing to your politician, whether it's writing to your police crime commissioner, although they're going to get rid of them, writing to your,
Are
whatever
they?
the issue is, whatever the issue is, or writing to government, writing to the Home Office, writing to the Home Secretary, you've got a Muslim woman Home Secretary, but whoever the Home Secretary is, you write letters to people. I think one of the but what are the weaknesses for Muslims in general is we're good at complaining on social media and to each other, but we're not very good at complaining using formal channels. If we did that, whether it's reporting, hate crime to the police or even to a helpline, that's one of the things I urge, because we need the data. If you don't have the data, it's very easy for the government to say, oh, well, the data's not there. Anecdotally, I know what you're saying. It kind of can build a case for policy change. I'll give you an example. For example, hospital care when you get poor care. Now, sometimes hospital boards will say, oh, we don't think there's a problem because we have a low level of complaints from minority ethnic communities. No, that doesn't mean that there isn't a problem because you're getting low level of complaints. What that means is they're not using the complaint service, and there may be a lot of problems. But if people complained in, they could, that, the hospital, for example, could use that learning. So we even, it's probably worth looking at. So we produced a Muslim Women's Manifesto booklet, and which people can download online. And in there, we talk about all the inequalities experienced by Muslim women. And then in there, we do a step-by-step guide how Muslim women can take that and then use that and different ways of, holding power holders to account. Imagine if, because we do that as Muslim Women's Network, but it's just we might be national, but we've only got so much resource, so many hours in the day where we are, for example, we're trying to do that with the government. But imagine loads of Muslim organisations across the country did the same as us. That would be so powerful. And also, by the way, do that to mosques as well, not just mainstream. So do
Mm.
that to mainstream Muslim organisation. So I mean, if we had the resource, what we wanted to do is we wanted to go around the country and explain this in a workshop. This is
Mm.
what you need to do. Here's a manifesto booklet, but we didn't get a resource. But we do want to try. So one of the things that I would say is, if anyone is listening to this, is if there are, women's groups across the country who would like us to come along and do a workshop on, it could be on, improving legal literacy and their legal rights, for example, improving legal knowledge around sort of hatred and discrimination, or it could be on the manifesto. We're more than happy to come along and, maybe do half a day. I've got staff that are willing to come out, and depending on the day, I'd be willing to come out myself as well, because we really need to, if you can do that, if you can use your platform to get
Yeah.
more, and you do it yourself as well, that would, I think, would, and in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, we start now, and there can people think, oh, can I be bothered to do that? Is it going to make any difference?
I think that would be
Well,
my question.
for children, think about, if you want things to be different for your children, for your grandchildren, for the next generation, well, you got to speak out now.
So that would be my question. That I think a lot of people are losing faith and trust in authorities and organizations because of the fact that they feel that even if they complain or raise issues, nothing ever changes. And it's like the trend is only going in one direction. So what I've seen is that people are kind of not giving their power away, as it were, to sort of expect those in positions of power to change things for us, but rather we make the changes ourselves.
It's about timing, right? So look, imagine if the feminists became before us, right? I mean, even just take the suffragettes, probably an easy example. Imagine, I mean, no one just said, okay, we're going to give you the vote. They had to chain themselves. I'm not saying we do that, right? But they had to, I mean, they were arrested, they were imprisoned. They had to keep going. And the answer was always no. Imagine if they gave up, we might not be voting now, or it might have got the vote much later. But they didn't give up. And then somewhere along the line, somebody was willing to listen. For example, some of the wealthy women started to fund them, for example. Then some of the politicians started to listen to them, maybe through the influence of their wives and sisters and mothers, right? It's the same now. Yes, we may have to say the same thing, and maybe no one is going to listen to us for several years. But sometimes it's about timing. Sometimes it's about the civil servant that's, in that position at that time, or the MP, or the minister. And I remember when I first went into the House of Lords, and somebody was really excited, and said, "Oh yes, the government is going to change a policy on something." I can't remember what it was now. And she said, "I've been talking about this for the last several years. I've been bringing it up, every year, 2, 3 times in a year. And finally now the government has decided to, take on board what I'm saying." Imagine if she had given up, as an example. So even in the corridors of power, it can take years to make a change, for example. And it's the same out here as well. And look, we may be heading for a government that's going to be, we don't know, in the next few years, anti-Muslim. So one of the things, a basic thing that we could do if we don't want to do advocacy, is whoever you're going to vote for, is just go and vote. I mean, in the last election, I spoke to so many Muslims who said, "I'm not going to vote," or "I didn't vote." Now, that's a very basic thing that we can do, is just whoever you're going to vote for, just use your vote in the local and national elections. I think that's a huge problem at
Yeah.
the moment, that
Yeah.
people aren't voting.
Yeah. I agree with that. And then on top of that, you get sort of all these extremists who say that we shouldn't be voting because it's an un-Islamic system and all of that. But that's a whole other topic. I've just got one more question for you, if that's okay. So your organization Muslim Women's Network uses Islamic feminism as one of its core lenses,
Values, yeah.
yeah, values, right? um as does We Rise. So I wondered if you could just speak a little bit about your approach to using religion and the Quran and the traditional Islamic sciences in order to help empower Muslim women.
For us, it's really simple. I mean, a lot of for example, there will be, in Muslim communities, they might say, well, why are you talking about this issue? Whether it's raising awareness of domestic abuse, for example. Many years ago, we did research on child sexual exploitation. So there are some people will say, well, don't do that, because by doing that, you are going to, you know, it's like washing your dirty laundry in public. You are going to give more ammunition to the Islamophobes, and you're going to therefore increase Islamophobia. And for us, it's, the Quran talks about social justice, even if it means speaking out against your own, right? So we say for us, we use that principle. So it does mean, yes, highlighting and speaking out against our own communities, but we equally speak out against mainstream organizations and government as well, basically. So for us, we say safeguarding is more important than, if it's going to ruin the reputation of Muslim communities, and that's unfortunate, and we can't control that. But we prioritize safeguarding, and we, believe in Islam that safeguarding would be a priority. So that's in the way that we use it. And then the other way is, for example, when we published a domestic abuse booklet, and we put all the, stats in there, illegal rights and how to get help. But we also made sure, there was, a few pages on, domestic abuse is against Islam. And then we explained it using the Quran and Hadith. Sorry, and then we've done the same for, whether it's some of the other issues, whether it's, we're talking about FGM, some of the abuses that Muslim women face. So then we will also, and, sometimes Muslim women are contacting us, and this is actually interesting. So sometimes what happens is when Muslim women are contacting us on the helpline, unfortunately, religion is misused.
Yes.
So they use religion to do coercive control. Oh no, you can't report to the police. You have to be patient and pray, for example. Or they'll use religion to, for example, oh no, you have to obey the husband, or even if you don't want to have sex, you have to have it because the angels will curse you all night. So they will use religious texts. We've also had cases where someone's been raped, and then the person raping them has said, oh, it's not my fault. There was a third person in the room. It was the jinn in the room, and the jinn done that. So religion is misused, right? So what we then are able to do, so imagine if they went to a mainstream organization with that information, they wouldn't really know what to do with it. And so we are able to then challenge that using Islam. And because of, we've started to get, and we do get this kind of, regularly comes up. We are now have just started to do research on spiritual abuse. But spiritual, because normally when people think about spiritual abuse, you think of witchcraft and jinn possession. But what we are now really specifically looking at, what does it look like in the family setting of, families using religion to do coercive control, or partners using it to do coercive control. That's just started. I'm happy to send you a link if you want to share that.
Please,
We're going
yeah.
to we're interviewing several women as well. We'll be looking to produce the report probably in September. And the idea is to use it to raise awareness amongst Muslim women that this is what, religious, spiritual abuse can look like. Because you know what? Muslim women, for a lot of them, they use faith as hope. When escaping domestic abuse, you use it to give you hope for the future. So there you have some people completely misusing it. So what we want to do that is use it to raise awareness and challenge it, but also recommendations for mainstream organizations that when they get that, they recognize it.
Absolutely. I think this is a huge thing that I'm seeing with my community as well online, which is how religion is so badly weaponized against Muslim women. And that is really the crux of spiritual abuse, when you're using religious arguments in order to control or abuse women. So even things like coercive control can look like a husband saying, you can't leave the house without my permission, because that's what it says in Islam, right? So
Give you one example. So we had one case many years ago where the woman, it was a love marriage actually, and then she wanted to go to college so she could get a good job. She wanted to do some training, and the husband says, no, I want you to stay at home, and in fact I want you to get pregnant and just and be, and I don't want to say the word just, but be a housewife, right? And then she was refusing. I said, no, I really want to go college, and I really want to get a job, and we can, have start a family in a few years' time. He then called an imam around or a scholar or somebody around, and they pinned her down, and then they gave her some holy
Physically.
water. Yes, and then they gave her some thing to drink, some holy water to try and, you know, get her to change her mind. So so it's the types of cases are very wide ranging. It's not, you know, maybe when we have the researches out, maybe you can read it and talk about it.
Wow, that is going to be very, very interesting. Yeah, definitely. Do you have an idea when it's going to be out?
I think it probably September. We're doing the research now, and it will be, by the time we write the report, it will probably be August. Then we've got to get it designed, and then it will be online. It'll be downloadable. So, you know, we want to just try and, I suppose, give examples, because I think the issue is a lot of people don't recognize it as spiritual abuse or coercive control.
Yeah.
So the idea will be to highlight the different ways in which it, you know, shows itself.
Amazing. Oh, one last question for you. As I ask all my podcast guests, what makes you rise?
I think what's probably kept me going really is I get angry all the time about a lot of issues. And that is my fuel, right? So that is my fuel that that fuels my passion. The anger fuels my passion. And I keep going. And I think for me it's actually almost like not taking a no for an answer. So when when the doors are closing, I just think, oh my God, there's got to be a way around it. But I am getting a bit tired now. So I think one of the messages that I would probably want to end with really is we do need to look after ourselves. And
Yeah.
it's really, really been dawning on me only in more recent months. I think I'm heading towards, I turned 57 this year. So I'm thinking, oh my
Oh,
God.
you did not,
Yeah,
Shaista.
so I'm
You
thinking
look
at 60.
amazing. Sorry, I
Thank
have
you.
to just
Oh,
say that.
thank
You
you.
look amazing.
And but I do think now that I'm heading to 60, I just thought, do I want to be as burnt out and knackered as I feel now? So what I would say is that you can only really do the best that you can if you're fit and healthy, because if you're not, then it impacts your mind, then you will start be negative, you will probably do less, I don't know, you might give up. And, you know, some women do like leave the women's sector. So what I've started to do is I want to leave on a positive my family didn't think I'd keep it up, but I have. So I'm doing got a personal trainer. I'm trying to do that twice a week. Although my diet isn't great, so I haven't fixed my diet, because with personal training, you're supposed to change your diet. So I haven't done that part yet, but I'll get there slowly. I'm having facials now. I've had a few facials recently, and even my mother-in-law said to me the other day, she goes, "Oh, you're glowing today," and I thought, oh, maybe my facials are working. I try to take myself to steam, sauna. I've started to, in the evening, try to switch off and, you know, put my phone away. Because even when you're watching Netflix, if the phone's next to you, you're still checking your messages, put it in another room. I've started to do that, and I actually do feel better in myself. So I'd please, everyone, look after yourself. And even if it's just sitting there for half an hour, like I used to have time to think, and I realize that I don't even have time to think anymore. So I'm trying to carve out a little hour here and there in a week, just to sit there in on my own, quietly, in solitude, to think. I think if I start to do all of those things a bit more, I think that's definitely going to help me rise even further.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you so much, Shaista. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to talk to you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I can vouch for the facials doing something.
Thank you very
You look
much.
great. You look amazing. I